It's a nice, quiet Saturday morning here at my house. It won't be quiet for long, but it's quiet for now. It's a great time to kick off my weekly Wanderings and Wanderings. Hello, my name is Anne. This is my channel, In Search of Wonder, and these are my weekly Wanderings and Wanderings. Today, as I said, is Saturday. It's quiet right now, but we're fixing to get pretty busy here in a minute. We have not one, but two graduation parties we are attending this afternoon. One of them for 3 people and one of them for 1 person. So we are going to fit in both of those graduation parties this afternoon. And then my sons have work that they need to do, so we need to get them to their jobs. And in this evening, I have a live discussion about how to read a book. So it's going to be a busy day from this point on. I am taking this minute to get this vlog started and let you know what I've got in progress. First of all, I need to make significant progress in 1776 by David McCullough. I did not make as much progress as I would have liked last week because I was concentrating on this book and The Dead Shall Rise, which hopefully I have finished by the time you're watching this video and have already posted my thoughts about it. That one I don't intend to be reading too much this week. I just want to finish it up and be done with it, although I am enjoying it. And also I am going to read part 3 in how to read a book per our reading schedule for our summer school plan. So I am looking forward to that. I think in part 3, he begins to apply some of the principles he talked about in part 2 to fiction and classics and other different kinds of books besides nonfiction and theoretical and practical works. I am looking forward to that because that is much more my typical reading than heavy nonfiction. So I'm hoping that it's a little bit more applicable for me in my reading situation of life. I'm also hoping to finish Hang a Thousand Trees with Ribbons. And when I have, and this is about Phyllis Wheatley, and when I have finished with that, as a companion book, I want to read her book of poetry, poems on various subjects, religious and moral, and her memoir. I am looking forward to reading that and hoping to get to that this week. Other than that, so finishing 1776, finishing Hang a Thousand Trees with Ribbons, starting the poetry, continuing in how to read a book, I don't have plans. I think that's a lot. So we will see if I'm able to get to any other fiction books. I don't want to put any more nonfiction going at the moment. I have had a lot of that already. So if I pick anything else up, it's going to be a fiction, probably one of the classics that I have on deck for reading for my Reading the Classics challenge. So that is, the titles are The Power of Sympathy and Charlotte Temple, I think. They're on my Kindle. So if I'm able to, I'll pick up one of those this week. Those are my plans. Let's see what actually happens. As for things going on this week, it's actually a slow week. So I think I might, today is busy, but other than that, I think I may actually have time to read significantly. I don't have a lot on the docket, so that's nice. Hopefully we'll have some good quiet reading time. So here we go. Let's get the week started. It is such a beautiful morning here in Virginia. The air is just slightly cool, and there's a fresh breeze blowing, and the birds are chirping, and it's sunny. It is not muggy, which is a modern day miracle for Virginia in June. If you know, you know. I could just, if the climate could be like this forever, I bet this is what heaven is like. I bet this is what heaven feels like year round. It's amazing. I don't know if you can see out in the woods back there, there is a fox. I can see it, but I don't know if you can see him in this video. But do you see that squirrel keeping a very close eye on him? That squirrel hasn't moved. It's just watching the fox. I don't see the fox anymore. Oh, and now the squirrel's like, okay, I think the coast is clear. Oh, the drama in my yard on a Tuesday morning. I was running some errands and went to Walmart, and I picked up my zinnias. I always love to plant zinnias in the spring, my favorite flower. And then I also picked up some marigolds because the ones my sons gave me for Mother's Day, they did not survive. They were like very small and puny, and also as soon as I had planted them, like a squirrel or something, or a rabbit maybe, got to them, and only one of them has survived. So I'm going to replenish the marigolds. And I have had wave petunias in hanging baskets and pots before, but I'm going to try them as a bit of a ground cover because that will fill out my gardens a little better than they currently are. I've never done that before, but I've been successful with petunias in pots, so I'm hopeful. I'm a little skeptical, but I'm hopeful. Since my last update, I actually finished 2 books. The first one, And the Dead Shall Rise, I will be talking all about that in my vlog, which will go live before you have seen this video, before this video goes live. So you may have already seen that one. If not, I will link to it here. One of these places, I will link to it, and also in the description box. So that one, very good, very much enjoyed that. Also, Hang 1,000 Trees with Ribbons by Anne Rinaldi about Phyllis Wheatley. I finished that one like last night. Like I was like, I am finishing this today. So I did. One thing that Anne Rinaldi does really well is the sensitive dynamic that Phyllis Wheatley found herself in, where she was a slave, so she belonged to the Wheatley family, and yet they treated her in a lot of ways like one of the family. They obviously educated her. We know that for sure. They educated her along with their own children, and it seems like more than likely clothed her, fed her. She didn't seem to have really a slave status in their household, but also she wasn't free. She did not get her freedom from them until she was a fully grown adult. And so there is that interesting dynamic where she was still at their beck and call in many ways. And also you could look at it as in a very negative light, as saying she was like their plaything that they showed off to their friends and neighbors. Or you could look at it in a more positive light. Did they really just see potential in her and giftedness in her, and so they nurtured that in the best way that they knew how? I like to think the best of people, so I like to think that was more the case. But also I do think that it did put Phyllis Wheatley in a difficult position because she only had those advantages as long as she was attached to them. And that bears out in her story, and it's really honestly the saddest part, that she earned her freedom, or they gave her, I should say, her freedom when she was a fully grown adult. But she still remained with them for some years because I think that there was a genuine loving relationship there on some level at least. And so she stayed with them. She took care of them in their final years. But then the war happened, and the Revolutionary War, and their family got torn apart. The house that they lived in got bombed. Like everything was just destroyed. And honestly, Phyllis Wheatley herself never recovered from that. She married a free Black man, but they never seemed able to quite make it work. And he floundered around professionally and ended up at some point in debtor's prison. And Phyllis Wheatley and her surviving child ended up living in squalor at the end of her days. And so it's a really sad and tragic ending. Anne Rinaldi doesn't go into those details in the story. She ends it on a positive note at a high point in Phyllis Wheatley's life, which was smart. But in the author's note, she talks about how it ended for Phyllis Wheatley and explores some of the possible dynamics that led to it. I don't think it can all be blamed on the Wheatleys. In fact, I think they only have a small part of the blame. I think one thing not in their favor is that they did not leave anything for Phyllis Wheatley in their will. So obviously there was always that sense like she wasn't actually one of the family. They didn't actually adopt her, and they didn't provide for her after they were gone. So that is a big negative for them. But at the same time, I think as long as they were living, they did willingly provide for her, and there seemed to be a mutually beneficial relationship there. I think it was the fact that the war happened at that time. Boston was decimated and destroyed in many ways, and people were not buying up poetry at that point in time. She had a very difficult time. She was never able to successfully sell a second book of poetry after her first one. And also I think that the war happened, and that created an environment that was difficult for her to survive in her situation. But also I think that the culture at that time in America in particular wasn't quite ready for her. And perhaps if she had stayed in London, because she did go to London at some point, perhaps if she had stayed there, her story might have ended up turning out very differently for her, but we will never know. So anyway, that is the story of Phillis Wheatley. The actual writing of it, this Anne Rinaldi version, I talked about already how I don't love it when authors purposely set out to create their own vision of a person the way they want her to be. And one quote in particular just put a bad taste in my mouth. She says, "We are told that Phillis was modest, shy, reverent, gentle, and unpretentious." And actually, I feel like what I have read of her poetry would go along with that. Yes, I thought, this is Anne Rinaldi speaking, that may have been her public persona, but what was she really like? So I set out to discover her. Phillis Wheatley presented herself to me as I read between the lines of all the scholarly work. My Phillis is vain, confused, silly, and at times conniving. She has moods. She falls in love indiscriminately. These are the watermarks of most teenagers. You mean you read into the scholarly work what you assumed all teenagers were like? Clearly, first of all, this was a different era and teenagers were different back then. First of all, like, that's just obvious. Secondly, clearly she was a gifted and unique teenager. She wasn't like every other teenager. So you're just looking past what everybody else says about her and what exists about her, and you're reducing her to something that is your own understanding of what a young adult is like and can't be anything other than, sorry, that was really bad grammar, but I hope you know what I mean. That frustrates me. Like, why not put Phillis Wheatley in the best light possible rather than in the worst light possible? Why give her attitudes that she did not appear to have had at any point in time? Why lower her as a person? Could you not respect her for what she actually was? I don't know. It put a bad taste in my mouth that the author felt the freedom to do that with a person who, I don't know. It's enough said about that. As you can see, I have some opinions about that. But anyway, next up, I'm going to hear from Phillis Wheatley herself. I have read some of her poetry, but I'm going to read this little volume of her poetry, which was the first one, I think, that she published. And then, well, she only published one. And then there is her memoir, which I don't know where that was written down or when. I don't think it was published during her lifetime. Anyway, I'm looking forward to reading her in her own words. That's next on my docket.
I just want everyone to know that I went to 2 thrift stores, and in the first one, I did not even look in the book section. Didn't even look. And then in the second one, I looked. I picked up. I perused. I browsed. I thought about it. But I did not buy anything. Even though they had copies of Georgette Hare books that I do not currently own in the editions that I am collecting. But I didn't buy them. I left them there. It was very difficult, but I did it. I did find something cool, though. This wreath was $4. And earlier this season, I was looking for a wreath for my front door, and they had similar ones to this at Hobby Lobby, but they cost a lot more than I paid at the thrift store for sure. And I don't know, I didn't love any of them enough to pay the Hobby Lobby price for them. So I didn't get one at that time. In fact, all I got was a little like blue metal star. So I wonder if that star can go on here maybe. I'm gonna try and see if I can like combine the two. Otherwise, I'll just hang the star somewhere else. But then on my way home, I took a circuitous route, so to speak, and I stopped at about 5 different little free libraries, which, by the way, were all in the same like neighborhood essentially, all within 2 minutes of each other, and very conveniently dumped me back out in the direction that I needed to go home. So that was really nice. But most of them had nothing that I wanted, but the last one, I hit the jackpot. The last one had this, The Little Women cookbook, and it looks like it's in perfect condition, like nobody even used it. Maybe somebody got it as a gift and was like, who are the Little Women and why do they have a cookbook? I don't understand. I had seen this when we went to Boston a couple years ago, and we were at their Alcott's house, orchard, I forget. Anyway, we were at their house, and at the gift shop there, they had this book, and I looked at it and I considered it, but I didn't get it at the time. So I picked it up at the little free library, and I put both of my books that I have been dragging around in my car for a while in hopes that I might find something in a little free library. I put both of them in there because I felt like this was the equivalent of my 2 little books that I was putting in there for sure. Probably, I could have put more in. I feel guilty taking this really awesome book and just leaving 2 books I didn't want anymore. But I mean, that's the nature of it, right? I guess. Very excited about this find. And I didn't pay a red cent for it. My petunias are just looking absolutely amazing. Love it. So gorgeous. Well, it's the end of the week, Friday, and I am still reading 4 books, but a slightly different set of 4 books. But that's just me, and that's what I do. So, of course, I am still reading How to Read a Book by Mortimer Adler and Charles Van Doren. I am almost finished with part 3, and by the time you will see this video, we will have had our part 3 discussion on my Discord server. And I have to admit, I think I said this earlier in the video, but I am a little bit disappointed, but it's my expectations of the book versus what the book is actually trying to do. I was expecting more guidance in reading classic or literary fiction, but it's definitely much, much, much more focused on nonfiction. Part 2 is kind of like the core of the book about analytical reading, and it's very much focused on nonfiction works. And then you can take that process and somewhat apply it to fiction, but not nearly in the same way. And to be perfectly honest, the process for reading nonfiction, as he describes it, is very intense. It's a more like studying, and it's not something that the average person has time for or even inclination for on a regular basis. Now, it is a process that gives you confidence to read books that you wouldn't otherwise. So there's a benefit in that. And I think that if you were to apply these ideas, even if not fully, then you would still get a lot of benefit out of a book, and you would be able to, the more you do it, like the more you could synthesize the process and be able to do it more quickly and as you're reading without having to, I don't know, I think initially it would be a very laborious process, but as you went on, you probably could do it pretty quickly. But anyway, I did find that it is very useful in applying to Bible study because it's very similar to some of the things I have done previously with Bible study. So every summer I choose a book or 2 in the Bible to focus on that I do Bible study with. And this summer it has been with the book of Galatians. And so I've taken some of his ideas in this book about terms and
propositions, as he calls them, or difficult sentences that you struggle with. And I have applied his process to that. And it's actually been very helpful. And I've really been enjoying the book of Galatians, by the way, loving my study in that. And pretty much every time I do a Bible study, I think, oh, wow, this is my favorite book. So that's where I'm at now. Galatians is my favorite book in the Bible. Just really, really loving it and enjoying all of the things that I'm learning from it. So this was helpful in that process. So props to this book for that. Not that it's completely unhelpful when it comes to reading other works. And I think that there's more possible application than he acknowledges when it comes to fiction and things. I do think there are broader applications of the process than he says that there are. But I have learned a lot. I've underlined a lot. I agree with a lot of his thoughts. I just don't think that most of us have the time and inclination to invest in books in the ideal way he describes. And in fact, he acknowledges that actually, which I appreciate. He doesn't spend a lot of time in acknowledging that. But I think he wanted to be as thorough as possible so that people can be as thorough as they want to be. Okay, so I do believe that I am getting bitten out here, so I need to hurry this up. The next thing is I finished reading the book about Phyllis Wheatley earlier this week, so I started reading her poetry and really am enjoying it. I'm reading a few poems a day and really loving it. I'm loving her style of poetry. I was sort of expecting that it would be kind of like stilted and very, very inaccessible based on what people were saying about the poetry before I started reading it. It's very much written in the style of poetry that was popular at the time she was writing it, which makes perfect sense. She wasn't necessarily a groundbreaker in any way in terms of poetry, which is fine. Not everybody has to be, but it's much better than I was expecting, and it's more accessible than I was expecting. Whether that's because I have more background now in that time period and in that style of poetry, perhaps, than I would have had 5 years ago, let's say, or if it's just that it's more accessible than I thought it would be. I don't know, but I am enjoying it very much. In particular, I really loved this poem, which I have actually read by her before. I sort of feel like every single emergency vehicle in town is competing with me right now. I have tried to read this poem twice and have been interrupted by emergency vehicles. Let's try it one more time. "'Twas mercy brought me from my pagan land, taught my benighted soul to understand that there's a God, that there's a Savior too. Once I redemption neither fought nor knew. Some view our sable race with scornful eye. Their color is a diabolic dye. Remember, Christians, Negroes, black as Cain, may be refined and join the angelic train." I'm about actually a little more than halfway through the actual poems, and then there's a memoir, so I am looking forward to finishing that up maybe this weekend. I am still working through 1776. Haven't gotten extremely far. I'm on page 85. Haven't quite finished the first part, and there are 3 parts. I am enjoying it. It would be better if I would just like sit and focus on this one. So at some point in the next week, I'm going to have to do that, because when I'm just picking it up in between other things, I will have forgotten details that were mentioned. So then I have to go and retrace my steps, which is annoying. Not that it's difficult to understand, really. It's just you have to have all of the pieces in place. He's going to reference them again in another chapter. So you have to keep track of all the details as he's talking about them. And I'm not super good at that, especially when I'm picking things up and putting them back down again. And the other thing that I have started is The Power of Sympathy by William Hill Brown, I think is the name, which is for my Reading the Classics challenge. It's epistolary, which is fun. And it is another one of those, I think I mentioned, seduction novels where a girl is taken advantage of, whatever. A cautionary morality tale. So far, all I know is 2 guys are exchanging letters. And the first guy, he's telling his friend that there's this beautiful woman he's fallen in love with. And his friend's like, well, what are you going to do about it? And he's like, well, basically, in so many words, I'm going to ask her to be my mistress. But then subsequently, as it turns out, when he was going to propose that to her, he couldn't get the words out because he found that he actually didn't want to take advantage of her in that way. And so now he's trying to decide if he wants to actually marry her, because I think it's a situation where, like, she's not the sort of person he was intending to marry, but he really loves her. And so he wants to marry her. So I don't know where we're going to go from here. It's going to be interesting, an interesting ride. I have a feeling, and I think it's going to be a little bit tangled and convoluted. I'm being introduced to a lot of characters. So we'll see what happens from this point. But that is all I've done. I feel like there's not a lot going on in this vlog for this week, but I've just had a pretty quiet week at home, running errands, honestly, and housekeeping, and trying to get my kids ready for their missions trip, which they will be going to Scotland with their youth group. So I'm really excited for them, but I have been doing like a lot of preparation, making sure they have everything that they need for their trip before they go. And then also just, I had like a meeting and church stuff and other responsibilities taking up my time. Also, another thing that's been taking up my time this week is I have been planning the Prairie Trail readathon, and I'm very excited. I'm so excited to share all the details with you about that. So look for that in the coming week or two. Well, it'll be in a couple weeks when I share all of the details about that. But I'm very excited about that. And in the meantime, this week I have actually 2 videos planned that, Lord willing, I will get uploaded. There's a lot to look forward to in the next couple of weeks. So thank you for watching and sticking with me, and let me know, of course, as always, in the comments, your thoughts about what I'm reading and what you're reading and all of the bookish things. And I will see you next time. Bye.
Oh, hey, me again. I'm so sorry. I totally forgot. I forgot to film a little bit of an introductory clip to something that my husband and I did earlier this week. My town, I recently discovered, actually has an app with downtown walking tours. So in the historic downtown area, you can do these walking tours. There are a bunch of different themed ones. This year they added a semi-quincentennial Revolutionary era walk. So you can go around town and see all of the sites that were connected in some way to the Revolution. Not a lot of Revolution stuff actually happened here, but there were a few key things that were all part of, you know, colonial era Virginia and colonies and leading up to the Revolution. So my husband and I did that earlier this week, and it was so much fun. There is another one, a Marquis de Lafayette walk, because Lafayette actually did come to Leesburg at one point. We're going to walk that one also at some point, but I took some pictures and videos while we were doing that tour earlier this week, so I'm going to close out this week's vlog by sharing those with you. So here we go. Let's take a little historic tour. The oldest building in Leesburg, built in 1763. It's built by a silversmith. This stone house was built in the 1760s and owned by a tenant farmer. On June 14th, 1774, the people of Loudon stood on these steps, not these exact ones, because this particular building was not here at that point in time, but it was the courthouse, and declared their resolves against Britain and the coercive acts. This is the cemetery on the grounds of the First Methodist Church in Virginia. I think actually in the colonies. I'm sorry, I forget the year that it was established, but Virginia was a leader in the freedom of worship movement. In June of 1776, we adopted our Bill of Rights that gave us the freedom to worship.
anywhere. This is the town hall, which apparently was inspired by the one in Colonial Williamsburg, which I did not know. This library contains all the historic documents and records of the town that you can apparently browse.